Hello everybody, welcome back to Road to Master. Hope you all have an amazing day. We are here going over game 3 from the Congress that I played in the open section. This was a very interesting game. It's also the game where I make the worst move potentially in chess history, right? So let's just crack on, right? It was game 3. There was 3 games in a day on Saturday and 2 games on the Sunday. So I was completely knackered at this one. And I think you can tell this from the game. I decided to play e4 because I wanted something a bit more fun. But after d6, I was like, okay, we're going to go into either a delayed Alapin, which could be cool. So I tried for that. Or we're going to go into a King's Indian attack if they don't take the bait, right? So, alas, it ended up as a King's Indian attack after g7. I decided to go for that. It's like the move order is not quite there, right? Because they played d6, but is very similar. I think some very slight differences that might affect the plan. Most importantly, not having the option to lock up on e5 is a big one, because you sort of need that space in the King's Indian attack, I think. Anyway, we keep developing. I go rook e1, like usual, hoping for knight f1. They go b5, which is what they should be doing, looking for a queenside attack, looking to provoke my pawns and make me feel a bit uncomfortable, especially with this sniper of a bishop right here. I played c3 to sort of plug that diagonal up, so something like b4 could work quite well for them, I think. Bishop b7, pretty natural, and I go for h4. Continuing my attack, a5. Now, this is actually quite similar to game 1 that I played in this tournament that I did a video on. I still decide to go a4 here, right? But there is luckily not the same tactics. I've not got a bishop on h6. Their queen's not looking at this. And I have the pawn on c3, which prevents the knight from going to b5. So this is actually a good move. It's not the best move, but it is an acceptable move. Because if they take, I could either take this with the rook or the queen, or potentially just ignore it, right? Because they don't really have many breaks. If they decide to push, I could probably just take with the rook there, because there's nothing that can really kick this rook out at the minute. And that's sort of like slowed down their whole queenside attack. They decide to push, which I think is the smart move. Keeps the pawn sort of rolling and makes me sort of ask questions about what I'm doing with these 2 pawns here. And with this bishop again, it's quite annoying. So I have to maneuver a bit here, but I think I get an okay outcome. c4, not a great idea. Gives a slight advantage to black with minus 1.3. The correct move was, what was it? If the computer decides to load, h6 apparently, and you just ignore it. Wow, very cool. I don't really see the point of that, because after takes, I guess you don't take. You do take, and then after bishop there, you probably go bishop to h6, right? And you can take one of these, but then maybe I could take this. Maybe as well, I could try get the queen involved. And go for a more direct queenside attack. Especially if you take this, it does not look good, because you've instantly put my queen on this diagonal. Although it's still giving a slight advantage for white after e5, for black after e5, because you're plugging this, but I get maybe the exchange back, or maybe I bust open the queen side, the king side. Sorry, I don't really know. Luckily, I played c4. Well, unluckily, I guess, because it was a mistake. But hey. And my point was, I'm trying to lock this up. Yes, it gives their bishop nice diagonal, but hopefully we're going to limit its effectiveness. And we start that by rook a2, straight away getting the rook off the diagonal. And I don't actually mind this as well, because there is potential for it to very quickly swing round to any of these squares. And sort of like instantly double up, right? So I think this is quite flexible. b3, I thought could be an interesting idea here. Just to open things up if you were that bothered about it, but I don't know if that really works. Knight d4, incredibly natural. I think it's a very nice square that I'm not contesting very well. I can in the future contest it, but right now it's slightly tricky. But also, the knight, it looks nice. It's not doing much. It's well controlled. And, I can swing this knight round. And if you take, I'm just going to replace it again. And you've not really got anywhere, right? Apparently queen d7 was the move. And I think that's to break on the d5 square. Which seems... I think that seems reasonable. You want to try get rid of this e-pawn, I think, to open this bishop. And your knight can still go to d4 at any point, basically. Or even e5 if you needed it to. And it's quite flexible, I think. You can still get a rook on there. Probably this rook, because you don't really want to push this. And if you leave this rook here, this rook can still come to e8, sorry. And then that might open up eventually. So quite a nice move, I think. I go with b3 because it's covered by the queen. And it opens up this second file for the rook. It's saying a mistake, still favouring black here at minus 1.5. And here it just wants knight takes f3. Okay. And then what? Maybe f5? I think it likes f5, yeah. That's quite nice. If you take, maybe you exchange, but then you've got a very weak diagonal. And you've activated their rook as well, which doesn't look particularly nice. So I think I would have played f5 here as black. But they decided to maneuver this knight over, which sort of makes sense, but I think it's the wrong idea. I do quite like this knight here to cover f5 if you ever wanted the break. And with it being on c6, you're sort of blocking in this bishop as well. So slight error there, I think. I maneuver my knight across to sort of prevent them from taking. Not that I think that matters, but it means we can replace this knight straight away. They move their a-rook over to e8, which I think makes sense. It depends where you want to break, really. If you want to break on the d-file, obviously you put it on the d-file. If you want to break on the f-file, you probably want to put it on the e-file, right? And leave this rook here. So I think that works. Again, they want knight takes, which seems pointless, I guess. We go bishop e3 to cover the d4 square once again. Threatening maybe at one point to take. We probably take with the knight first. And then, like we said, just replace the knight straight back again. f5 here. f5... not as potent with the knight here, but there is the knight here, of course, covering that as well. So it probably works. Maybe we can take. The compute wants knight takes d4, which I think I would agree with. But realistically, what else is black going to do, right? I don't think d5 necessarily is on the table anymore. So, yeah, I agree with f5, actually. Now, I think in this game, I thought it was a slightly weakening move, but I disagree with that conclusion now. And I went here with h5. h5 is a risky one. We are being attacked in the center, and usually you say don't attack on the wing when they can break in the center, right? But I think this works because we had h4, knight h4 as an idea, which we will see because they played e5. Apparently a complete miss, and g takes is better. I thought g takes, by the way, we probably go knight g5. But then h4. Yeah. So maybe even knight h4 then, and just prevent h4 from being played. Then bishop f6, and then we take. And I can see us having some things, but also, king h8 and rook g8 is very easy, I think, to defend. So we've not really got great hopes of an attack. But they decide to go e5, which is a weird move, I think, because if I was to take here, you would probably want to take back with the e-pawn. No, apparently you take back with the knight. I stand corrected. I would take back with the e-pawn. Apparently G it takes is better though. I don't understand chess. I don't understand chess. Why is e5 bad then? E5 is bad. Oh, because you've blocked off your bishop. That is the reason e5 is bad. Yes, so I could potentially go knight takes, and then after knight takes, bishop takes, and then your bishop is not coming to c3 at any point now, and it's kind of a bit blocked in. So that is the reason why e5 is not a great move. I don't know why they wanted e5. Maybe they just wanted to support f4 as a potential idea. But anyway, I decide to ignore this, and I take on g6. I take on g6 with the idea that here we can potentially go knight h4, which it says is an inaccuracy. Apparently it wanted e takes. Did it want? E takes f5 first. Then after knight takes, I don't particularly see the appeal, to be honest. Knight g5 here, apparently. Oh, and maybe then you've got some d5, but this knight surely just moves. Ah, but then you've got this. That's a tricky threat, actually. So this knight would have to come here then. And then bishop takes b7, queen takes. And then knight e4, and you're claiming you get this square. Ah, okay. I can sort of see that because they've got no f-pawn anymore to kick you out. Maybe they could push with d5, but after just takes, you know, we're still pretty solid. So that's interesting. We decide to go knight h4 instead to attack these pawns. I think here they can still take. What did they do? Yeah, I think here... Actually, no, because then we would just take this, obviously. Push you can't do. So I don't know what you're supposed to do, actually. f4. Which would sort of force takes. Apparently you want knight takes g6. I don't like the look of that. Because takes is a fork, right? That's scary. That is scary, I think. I would probably just trade, maybe. And then after knight takes, maybe knight f3. Or knight takes g6, yeah. Yeah, queen f7. Which is apparently a brilliant. Wow. But I guess, yeah, I don't see why queen f7 is a good move. That's a crazy one. No one in their right mind would play that. No one in their right... Oh, but I guess the problem is, if you try anything else, I've got problems with queen h5. Nope, blunder. Okay. I don't know this game. This game is hard. This game is very, very hard. Oh, because of queen f7. And you don't actually have any threats. It looks scary, but... yeah. Ignore me. As per usual. They drop knight back to e7. And I think that's just to open up trades on the light squares. I respond in turn with bishop takes because now they have nothing to replace this knight once this knight's moved. So I'm going to take that as my chance. The bishop's awkward anyway, especially with like f4 threats. So I'll deal with that now. And they took with the c pawn, which I think is interesting. I personally would have taken with the e pawn because that looks like where more of the play is. But taking with the c pawn, you've still got like the ugly dark squared bishop. And now I've potentially got c5 breaks as well. So if you can defend the c5 breaks, sure, right? Go for it. But I think I've got a bit of something on that side of the board, which we do see later. Spoiler alert. I go rook e2 here, which is a terrible move. My whole point is that I want the queen to potentially come on this diagonal, right? Infiltrate on h5 and g4. So by playing rook e2, I've just stopped that, and the rook's not actually doing anything here anyway, which is... You can tell I was getting tired, right? It's much better if you want to move this rook to go to c2. Like we said, to potentially go on this diagonal. And better yet, don't move the rook at all. Like, there's no need to. Apparently, e takes is the correct move. f4, apparently an okay move. And then rook c2 is next. So, yeah. I go rook e2 anyway. Luckily, they decide to push, which I was... Well, I say luckily. That's... Luckily is a bad word. I don't know why I said that. It's good for them to push, actually. I was hoping they would take the pawn and I would get to activate my rooks, which was the whole reason of moving to e2. They decided to push, which locks up this pawn forever, makes this rook useless, and threatens f3 as a potential future move. So I'm not happy. With g5 as well coming, because the knight covers these squares quite nicely. So I'm not happy at all. I go bishop h3 to potentially look for checks, which could be very interesting. With some knight maneuvers, especially if this queen could come in. That would be so nice, right? If only we didn't move the rook to e2. And they can't allow that. So they either have to move this knight and give up this pawn, or they just go bishop c8, which is the clearer move, right? We trade off. And then queen takes. I go back to c2, where it should have been in the first place. And we're in a bit of a solid position. Like, not much is going to change from here. They can start to prod on the king side. But the fundamental structure, I don't think is changing much. Knight 4 f3, obviously save the knight, right? This knight is slightly useless, but it does become a key player soon, because they are going to try and invade. So if we move the king up to g2, the rooks are going to cover h1, and this knight eventually will naturally cover h2 as well. So that's all good. Bishop f6, I think, was just to get out of the way and clear a path for these rooks to infiltrate, hopefully with the queen as well. Coming quite nicely to h3. So I'm a bit scared, but I also think, if I play this right, I should be safe. Knight d2, and the reason of knight d2 is A, to allow this knight to come somewhere, and B, to potentially play c5 in an endgame. Takes, and then the knight's going to sit forever on c4 and going to hit both of these pawns, which is nasty to defend. So that's my idea behind that. King f7, again, just making room for the rooks to come in. Swing over to my king. I here offer a trade of queens. I think I have to do this. Apparently they want c5 straight away. But I really don't want to give them any hope of playing queen h3 at any point with the rooks on the h file. So I'm getting rid of this now. The knight's going to come to a nice square where it can't really be hit, where it's going to naturally cover h2, like I said as well. So I think I'm happy with the queen trade. They decline it, which I don't think is wise for them, because now potentially my queen can infiltrate somewhere, and it ties down a few of their pieces. We double up the rooks on the c file, looking for c5, like we said. I think a pretty clear plan. I'm not scared of this just yet, because they need 2 moves extra to even do anything, and then knight f3 as well is going to be pretty secure. c5, yeah, they decide to push, which I think is a great move, actually, because if I take, they're going to take back with the knight, and all of a sudden they've got this c3 square, which is super, super annoying. I can try defend with knight e4, but then they would take back with a pawn, and then this is losing. I'm pretty sure, if I know anything about chess, this is losing. What are my rooks doing? The queen's going to pick off both of these pawns, and I'm cooked. I am absolutely cooked here. So they go d5, and I ignore this. The reason I ignore this is because if they take, I take back with the knight, I think. And if they go there, I think I go queen d7 is my plan. Which makes things quite annoying for them because A, I've got a check. B, I've got like rook c8 coming. And it's quite nice, I think. What do we do here? Rook c6 apparently. Oh, threatening a bishop. So you would have to maybe go rook c5. Looking to take the knight and then take the bishop. Rook takes d7. Rook c5 looks quite nice in my opinion. Hit this pawn, hit the knight. Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I like this. I like this. Bishop e7. And you just take the pawn, right? And for this loose pawn that was scary, you've got a much more secure pass pawn, which I think is the whole point. Anyway, they spot that and they go rook d8 to prevent queen to d7 check once the knight moves. And here I go rook c5. I was debating lots of things here, but I think rook c5 is a very sensible move to play. I don't want to get cut off, so I want a rook here. But also you've got to be very careful. If you get cut off, you've actually got an escape route for your rook. But the plan is mainly to go b5 and then rook b7. And looking for the pin on the king and the queen. Threaten the pin at least because they're not going to just walk into that, right? They go rook h6. And here I think I've got to take evasive maneuvers, right? Because they're a couple moves away from doubling up. I go king g2. Knight h3 is coming next turn. And I'm very safe, right? They can trade off. I'm still very safe, right? And I'm confident I'm not losing this position. Rook d8, going back to protect the check. Again, if they ever wanted to do takes. And I'm never going to take this, right? Especially in this position. If I decide to take, the big threat here is knight e3, which I think is not nice. It's still saying it's winning for me. With knight takes d5. We can't take d5 with the knight. Rook takes d5, apparently, is the move. And you sack the exchange. And maybe just go knight e4. And then you claim these knights are dominating, I think, is the point. Maybe you can go queen f5 and threaten this. What's their plan? Rook d8. Knight takes f6, really? And maybe just looking for takes g5. See, I think I calculated something similar to this, but I didn't like any rook g6 ideas. But I don't think that's actually that scary in this scenario. And the point is, I guess, that just the king's like super, super loose. Knight back to e4. Right, this knight's not going anywhere. There's still no threats on my king. And now I have like several checks, I think. So I don't know if this is plus 5.4, but that's the computer talking, right? But I think I don't mind this for white. Anyway, rook p5, they decide to take. We take back with the queen. I don't think it's a particularly accurate move. In fact, the computer says it's an inaccuracy. But I really just did want to avoid this fork, I think. And also add another defender onto the c6 pawn at the same time, because I was potentially scared of this being taken. I calculate stuff like this, but then we have knight c5 with the pin. I think works quite well. And after knight d6, we can just take the pawn, right? And then we're winning a piece. There were some other scenarios I don't quite remember. I should probably write them down when I'm thinking of them. But yeah, they decide to take. We take back with the queen. If we take back with the knight, I was just worried about this, right? I don't know what I'm going to do in this situation. Again, it just wants us to sack the knight, sack the rook. But we take back with the queen. Also, taking back with the pawn is not awful. But then we don't have any way to kick the rook on d6. So we don't get the same compensation that we would otherwise, I don't think. Queen to e4. Queen back to c8 is a tricky one. Hoping again for queen h3. I don't necessarily think queen h3 is that scary though, because again, the knight covers h2 very, very nicely. But I decided to go g4 just to be safe. And here, knight g6. This is where things go downhill, folks. What is knight g6 threatening? It's threatening knight f4 with potentially a series of very scary checks. Bearing in mind this rook is already potentially coming in at some point. I play it cool. I carry on the attack. b7 check, forcing the king to the back. They could try something like this, but then maybe I've got like queen f5 and I think we're happy. No, apparently losing. Apparently losing. Rook h1. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. Is there anything else? King g3, king f2. Wow. Okay. And they're not going to move the knight back because they've just moved that to potentially attack us. So, yeah, they decide to go back to g8, which I don't know is the safest of moves because potentially I have some checks on this diagonal, or on this square or this square as well. Maybe you're better going to f8. I don't quite know. And c7 I think is a good move. The queen's covering the rook, and we're threatening b8 check. Not check, with the pin on the king. And the pawn's attacking the rook as well. So I think we're good here. We allow knight f4 because I calculated that the knight checks were harmless. But they decide to go for it anyway. And here I play quite possibly the worst move in chess history, right? I have multiple winning moves. King g3, for example, allows rook h3, but then after king f2, you're pretty safe. King f2, very safe as well. It allows knight h3 check, but then you escape some other place, right? Probably just king g3. And then king f1 as well allows knight h1 check, but then maybe knight g1 to block the check. And again, we're still threatening this rook, right? And we're still threatening the fork, so they can't really spare any time. They have to be doing checks. And I'll give you a second to pause and find out the move that I made. It made me want to stop playing chess, to be honest. Anyway, here we go. King g1. King g1. Straight to mate in 5 for black. And the reason is, I forgot that the queen no longer guards this pawn. Chess is so stupid. It's such a stupid game. Yeah, one slip of brain concentration and it's all over. And I did this without spending any time as well because my opponent was low on time, and I thought the classic thing, why win when you can flag your opponent, right? Why win in a winning position when you can just flag your opponent? And then we made king g1, and then I promptly got mated. And I went home in not a happy state. Luckily, the next day we recovered quite well, I think. But yeah, a lesson, a cautionary tale for you all. Never make a move without thinking. Never, ever, ever make a move without thinking. Anyway, I ended up losing that, obviously, and yeah, it hit hard. I'm not gonna lie. I was not happy, but it's the game, and you can't do anything about it. You can only learn from it and not make the same mistakes. You have to take the hits before you can take the glory and learn from it. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like if you liked. Please subscribe if you really liked. And I'll catch you guys all later. Bye-bye.